afternoon. Welcome. We are about to go live here with our great panel this morning on communities of practice. I'm thrilled to welcome everybody in. Please stay engaged as the audience. We welcome your questions. We'll be monitoring the chat. And so without further ado, I'd like to introduce our panel. Today we're chatting with Pickett Slater from the MICA Social Design Program. We have Julia DiMauro, who is a Neighborhood Design Center Program Manager for Community Design, and Allie O'Neill, who is our Program Director for also in Community Architecture. And so, welcome. Thank you so much for being here. We're excited to dig in a little bit on the topic. It's really important. It feels salient to all of our practices and how we get to work together. So, if you'd like to we can go across and have you each just sort of share a little bit about yourself, say hello, and then we can dive into some questions.
So as Bryony said, hello everyone. I'm Allie O'Neill. I have the absolute honor of leading our architecture and community planning team here at the Neighborhood Design Center. Very briefly, I'm trained as an architect. I am a facilitator, a strategist, a designer, and started way back at the Neighborhood Design Center as a volunteer. So I've worn many, many hats over my time with NDC.
All right. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Pickett, and I'm a community designer. I think you mentioned I do a bit of teaching at MICA, which is the Maryland Institute College of Art and the Social Design Program. But also I'm the founder and managing principal of a social change design firm where I work to connect communities and institutions to come up with solutions to challenges. So looking forward to the conversation.
Hello, everyone. My name is Julia DiMauro. I manage our Community Design Works program in the Baltimore office. I've been with NDC since about January and came into community design kind of through maybe an angle or a wave, maybe is a better way to put it, background in anthropology and historical urban studies from Baltimore. Love to be back in Baltimore. And love working with NDC and getting to meet these great colleagues sitting next to me.
Well, so to dive in, I wanted to just get a chance for each of you to share a bit more with our audience about how you entered the work, sort of early days, some collaborations that were formative in your professional pathways. So love to hear more about that.
Yeah, I'll share a little bit because I think you guys shared architecture and anthropology. I think I come to design from social work background. So, and I got to it looking for ways to solve different challenges that I was seeing, not only in like my personal life, but like in my community. And then I learned about this idea of design methods or design approaches, like a lot around human-centered design, and then trying to apply that in the social context. So a lot of my background experience comes from kind of looking and thinking about communities and people and how people interact. And I kind of come through design in that way, but I love talking to like other like designers from different backgrounds, like architecture, and then also like anthropology. So I'm totally interested in figure out like how did you wind up in the place you are?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, as I mentioned, it was kind of unintentional, I guess is a good way to put it. I started off in anthropology, and I think for me, the red thread has been the question of how is knowledge generated and how is it legitimized and what relationship does that hold to power? And I think in anthropology, what you're asking are really the hows and the whys of every single thing you see around you. And specifically in relation to the built environment and to urban spaces, I think, what we really try to do in our work is acknowledge that relationship between knowledge and expertise and power, but flip it on its head and really, make something like generative and for and by the people with that kind of expertise that people who live in their built environment have. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting hearing you both talk about it because I know I came through architecture school. I remember having, in hindsight, I had some rumblings that something was going to change. For me, it mattered to me who I was designing for, and it was very hard for me to design for theoretical users. So I would go out and research or create stories to start to try to get that connection. And then I lived in Chicago. That's where I kind of cut my teeth in architecture.
Ooh, that's like a lot of stories.
Right. And I rode my bike everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
So I was working downtown in Chicago, but also had projects on the south side of Chicago. Chicago's a hyper-segregated city. And I believe and was told often that design and architecture had the power to make great change. And I would look around often on the south side of Chicago and wonder where design was. Why wasn't design showing up? It just felt like there was nothing. There was just so much opportunity. Not that design can solve everything, but that it could contribute to something. And I just wasn't seeing it. And so for me, it became a thread throughout to just start to understand, again, what design, architecture, planning, landscape, how it can support community, how it can support existing assets, existing strengths, that existing knowledge, and how it's developed over time of how we can even start to, I'm hesitant to say legitimize, because I think that confers a level of power that is inappropriate, but that we can welcome into or tear down the barriers to seeing that expertise and really valuing it deeply.
And I think it's amazing. Like we all three can kind of sit here and talk about the idea of power and like who has power and who doesn't, and then how do you flip it and how you switch it. And a lot of my work, I mentioned I try to connect communities and institutions, and I do believe like communities, they are the experts in their lived experience, right? And they have a lot of expertise and knowledge, and that carries power, but a lot of times it's not recognized or valued in the same way. And so in a lot of my work, I'm trying to like champion those ideas and solutions and connect institutions who oftentimes they want to do great work, right? And they have resources, but sometimes they don't always go about in the best way. So I try to connect those two, but fundamentally it is about power and how do you reallocate it in a way where it better serves people. So,
and how do you speak to those systems that want power to stay as it is?
Yeah.
And that to me becomes it's sort of this next chapter of how do we speak into systems? How do we speak into not looking at case-by-case reallocations of power, but systemic reallocations of power, so that what we're starting to talk about is a paradigm shift. I mean, it's a big question, obviously, for a different time, but, when I think about, just to kind of wrap us back a little bit to communities of practice, when I think about my community of practice, when I think about the people who have shaped my work, who continue to challenge me and educate me, those are the people who welcomed me into these questions. And how we might continue as practitioners in each of our different disciplines with this commonality that we have. And you working with institutions and some of that opening eyes or sharing perspectives, and also just the work we do between community partners and with our government partners, how our work can be seen almost as that community of practice as part of that systems change. I don't know. Do you have any thoughts or examples of?
Yeah, like I was thinking about that, and I was one of the things you mentioned communities of practice. I was like, who is my community? Like, who did I practice with? And I'm fortunate to get a chance to start working with you all, so that you're part of my community now as well. But I do have other great folks. I think of like Lisa and Chelsea at like Wild Seed, two amazing sisters who are doing amazing work in Baltimore, and my girl Khadijah Hart, doing a lot of work there in communities. And one of the things that you mentioned is this idea of like systems work. And I struggle with this a lot of times because the projects that I select, they are very they're on a case by case basis, right? They're in a specific community with a specific institution. And I try to make that better on that micro scale, but I'm kind of hoping that it has some ripple effect to like a bigger system. But I think as designers, we're always constantly trying to figure that out. Like, how do you work at different scales from like the immediate, which is like, you think about the Neighborhood Design Center and its history coming out of communities and what it means there, but also like it's a charge to kind of create some systemic shift. And it's not easy. I wish I had the answers. I still don't.
Yeah, I mean, I think all large systemic changes, the first question you grapple with, and the one that you will always kind of have to address, is what is your theory of change? Like, how can you imagine change being possible? Is it a top down, bottom up, a mix? And I think that's in our work what we're constantly trying to figure out and kind of address on a case by case basis, because maybe there isn't one answer. There isn't one answer for every single community or every single design problem.
Yeah.
So.
And you mentioned theory of change. Like I'm working with like the students at MICA now. We've been talking about it for the past month, like theories of change and like how it is, and trying to assess that. But you're right. It's figuring out to what is it that you're hoping to change in the world. And for me, I think I've settled on it is this connection between communities and institutions. But then I try to pick those design projects that have some larger systemic thing at its core that I try to get to as well.
Yeah. Well, it makes me think about, and this is a shout out to former NDC team member, current board member, former social design student, Maria Garcia Diaz, who brought into, I know, she changed. I remember her bringing into the office Adrienne Marie Brown's Emergent Strategy.
Oh, yes. Amazing book, yeah.
Right? And all of the ones since, and Holding Change is amazing. But I often think in my moments where I do get lost in this, like, wait, but the here and the now has needs, but then there's a larger change. And I take so much comfort in the notion that we aggregate, that large-scale change happens in a series of smaller moments.
Yep.
And it is that ability to, just like you were saying, look up in a project and see the larger, but then come back to the moment. So I think about that a lot, and just kind of looking to, I mean, Adrienne Marie Brown, and I think I look often to Teresa out of Department of Places and some of the work out of the Center for Urban Pedagogy that's been so amazing. And the Equity Collective, just as people who either very closely or from afar I have admired and really tried to soak in so many of the lessons that they've taught.
Yeah, and you pick up so much, because I think you mentioned emergent strategy, right? And as a social worker, right? Like I'm trained in like looking at social systems, but you tend to forget sometimes. You don't realize that the work that we do, right? It is within social structures and social systems, and they are like their own living, breathing kind of thing. And it's not like mechanistic where you can move this lever and this thing kind of happens. They kind of emerge and form. So I'm thank you for bringing it up. It just reminds me so much of it. I forget.
So you all have mentioned some really excellent sort of peers in the field or aspirational groups doing incredible work. Is there a sense of sort of like what differentiates community design practitioners within these? We're talking about a lot of overlapping fields between social work and anthropology and all the different design fields, community development. And so when we focus in on sort of that overlapping sector that we relate to as community designers, what are some of the differentiating or particular characteristics or elements particular to that community?
I was as a part of like when I'm teaching at MICA, and one of the things that I wanted to make sure I did this year was bring in community designers to into the classroom, and then also get us outside of the classroom to go see it actually happen in community. And so we went and visited a community of Park Heights here in Baltimore, and we visited a number of different community designers. We went out to Plantation Park Heights with Farmer Chippy, which is this great urban farm there. We visited the Sankofa Children's Museum, which is this amazing museum that's in the community for Black kids and just the community in general. And we even stopped and ate at like a community restaurant there, Island Cuisine at Judy's, which is delicious. But each one of those stops, right, like they are community designers, right? They're designing in their own way, right? Whether it's bringing I think Judy's Island Caribbean, right? Like Chef Judy brought this cuisine that I think Park Heights has one of the largest, like, Caribbean immigrant populations in Baltimore, right? And she designed that for that community. And you think about Sankofa and the Children's Museum and Farmer Chipia, Plantation Heights, they each bring what it is, their uniqueness to that field of design. And I think a lot of times, because I teach, social design too, that a lot of times we can get caught up in the methodologies, right? The skills, the tools, the techniques of it. And that's good because you can learn more, you can grow more. But I really do believe everyone is a designer at its core, and you can be a better designer. So I think some of what separates it for me is sometimes folks are designers and they wouldn't call themselves that, right? And as professionals, we can say we use the language of design and the tools and techniques, and we see ourselves as designers, but other folks are as well.
Yeah, I think what you're getting at is, it's something I think about a lot, is I think we can spend a lot of time trying to define the borders.
Mm.
And I'm actually more interested in looking for the commonalities and letting the borders be fluid, because I think our world is changing. The names of different typologies of work are changing. We're learning more to see more people as designers. And so for me, I think it's responsiveness. It's a commitment to participatory work and that deep belief that everyone is an expert in their place. And a belief that design can contribute to something greater and can make shifts. But that, to me, I think is the space of interest to me, is what's in common, because I can learn from the Adrienne Marie Browns of the world. I can learn from, so many artists who have had social practices, just so many different people, public health, like there's just social work. There's so many fields, and to me, it's not the field so much as it's what is relevant for that deep belief in those local, responsive, specific strengths or asset-based solutions.
And I think also, you asked what maybe differentiates it from other fields of design, and how I interpret, I think what you both have said, is that it's really a commitment to working collectively towards a collective goal. So it's not just one designer, one person with their expertise coming in and working towards one goal. It's really about, through this project, whatever scale it's at, building a structure and a way of being together that is generative and does, ultimately, hopefully, ideally, obviously we're talking very idealistically, but I think it really is a commitment to the belief that that's something that's achievable through kind of community design and working collectively towards a goal or two.
You all are sort of answering the questions before I can even get to them. So I don't want to sort of wade in, particularly such a beautiful exchange. I think that's so well put. And so with that commitment to working collectively to a collective goal, are there thoughts about how we can continue to build that community of practice with that, with that framework in mind? Like, what does it take to intentionally continue to build?
First thing that pops up for me is an acceptance of stickiness. I think
What do you mean by that, stickiness?
Just, again, I think at least for me, I always run into kind of, and this is just a judgment on myself, but like lofty ideals, and the stickiness, in order to achieve any, collective goal, I think that you're going to run into some disagreement. You're going to run into power dynamics, power struggles, and that's, you have, like, there's, I can't remember the question now, but I think that's part of, I'm sorry, I forgot the question.
Well, so what does it take to continue to build the community around this commitment to collective work? And so that shared acknowledgement, I think, of that things aren't going to be smooth, and there are going to be sticking points or challenges.
Well, and actually an understanding that smooth doesn't actually mean innovative or change making or deep solutions.
It could actually be counter to all those too.
Yeah.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
to smooth the process to me is actually I start to kind of
Mm.
go, uh-oh, have we not created a space where people can give authentic feedback? Have we missed questions? Have we misframed something? How can we figure out what's going on? Or is everyone trying to get out of this room? But I think so often it's the commitment to that, but it's also exactly what we're doing right now, which is where we're talking about and thinking about our practice, and we're talking about stickiness, discomfort, conflict that becomes generative versus destructive, but that I think in a community of practice, you're talking about how you're doing what you're doing, why you're doing what you're doing. You're talking about your foibles and your failures and the things that you wish had gone differently, and as well as your successes. So you're kind of shedding a lot of that ego of performance, and you're authentically engaging. And then I think there's also a willingness to take down those traditional hierarchies. Like so often you feel like in life you have to reach a certain age or status before you're a mentor, and until then you're a mentee. And it's like, how much should we miss in all of that by taking that? So in the same way that it's seeing everyone as a designer and really honoring that, like how are we seeing and learning from one another in that intentional way and naming it, like making space to really say, you know, I'll never forget the one woman when I was working in Chicago and we were doing work in community gardens, and she we were asking her about how she might want to come together in the hospital in this community school garden, and she asked me very, very point blank what made me different from all the other young people who had come out and asked her questions about her community. She changed my practice, and she will forever be part of that. You know, and I think those moments and the deep gratitude I still feel for her, where I'm like, I go in there and I'm like, what does differentiate? You better hold that, like do right by what she asked you. You know, I think those are the things that we need to call ourselves into and be open to.
Yeah, you talk about stickiness. That's stickiness. And you know, you almost like stole my answer too, right? It's this importance of like reflection, and then you did just such a great job of describing what that is, to kind of be able to look at our work and the things that we do. So it's a doing and reflecting, and then so I'm going to add another one that I think is and it's something about, it's kind of like represented in our ability to have a conversation as an architect, social worker, anthropologist, that it is something about like collective disciplines coming together to learn from one another. Because my co-director is also an architect. I've learned so much from him, like at MICA, and anthropology. It's like it's a lot. It's so much of what we do, right? It is kind of connecting in communities in ways, and listening to communities, and understanding and asking questions that fuels a lot of the work that we do. And so I've learned so much from other like fields and professions. So the ability to kind of come together as a community of practice, but from different vantage points and different perspectives, I think is something else too that I think is important as we think about communities of practice.
Yeah, I would agree with that, and I think that that's actually something we try to do, and we talk about a lot of times with our volunteers and our volunteer driven work through community design works, which is we try to break down professional echo chambers. You know, so often everybody works within their discipline, and you sort of grudgingly, there's an amount of contract fee that has to go to a different discipline, or you need it. That's our way, but there's also a joyful way to collaborate across disciplines in order to, again, kind of collectively achieve something greater. That I think is important, but just kind of to tie back to a lot of the work you're doing, Julia, with CDW.
Yeah, and I think that's, I mean, I'm 11 months into the position, and still every new design team you put together.
Well, you're not a year in yet? That's, oh my God.
But every new design team of volunteers, that whether they be architects, landscape architects, environmental designers, just, art directors, just designers that have no specific
Mm-hmm.
category. I'm just in shock and awe and pure gratitude each time they get to learn from each other, I get to learn from them, and the community, most importantly, also.
Well, a lot can happen in a year. A lot can happen in a year.
Well, I should do a quick note here that we've got maybe about 5 minutes left, and we have some questions coming in that I want to give some time to. I'm going to also say that this is more than a 5-minute question, so don't feel, but take it with a grain of salt. But one of our audience members asks, there's so much violence-related trauma here in Baltimore. Where do you see the role of design?
Wow. Whew. Oh my God. Okay. Where to start with this one? I think design does have a role in healing, right? And the reason why I say that is a lot of the systems and the structures that we have in Baltimore that perpetuate or lead to this violence, right? They were designed, and in some cases intentionally designed. And I think if you're thinking about healing kind of violence and trauma, right, you got to think about how do you redesign or reimagine those existing systems into something new, right? Because poverty is violence, right? Like that is violence. And and how can you redesign that? So I can talk a lot more about it, but I'll just leave it at that.
And huge shout out to exactly what you were saying and Antoinette Carroll's work. Like every system that has been designed can be redesigned. And our work can and should be in service of setting people up for healing. I don't think we can ever set out and say we will heal people. I worry again that there's a power issue there, but that we can be in service of and in support of, and really critical about those systems and really name violence in deep, expansive, and systemic ways. Yeah. That's another whole live panel.
Yeah.
For that. Well, I should say if there are any more of the audience that have questions, please feel free to pop in and let us know what the questions are. And then in the last few minutes here, if any of you have sort of like encouragement, words of wisdom for emerging practitioners, people curious about the work that we all work on collectively, and what some of the future looks like. Words of wisdom, sage advice.
I would say be who you are and follow what feels right to you. I think, I came into this work out of a deep personal connection. I grew up in the South in a form of rural poverty. And a lot of that, I saw how systems affected my family and me. And a lot of the work that I do is very personal, right? I do it for my sisters. I do it for my family. I do it for me and for making the world a better place. And I think I've been able to say, like, be uniquely who you are in the way that you need to be in the world and show up with that. And I happen to do it through the lens of design, but it's me. So I would encourage other folks to do that as well.
I would say something I've learned as kind of still a young professional, and I'm still learning, is that you should always reach out to people that you admire. There's nothing can go wrong, and that there's so much that you can learn just by kind of, again, building that community of practice and kind of sharing the things that you're interested in and having them shared back.
And I mean, I would say that surround yourself with people who find your people and do it by being authentically yourself, reaching out to people, but welcome and cherish those people who will tell you the hard things. That is how your practice gets better, because you don't know what you don't know until you're confronted with it. And my heart is swelling as I think through the people who have patiently, lovingly, and kindly been honest with me at times where it has been like a deep, like, okay, all right, give me a second. And without them, I wouldn't know to not do that again. I wouldn't know that I would have done that. And it is the deepest gratitude, and it is those people. And so it is, I would say, the MICA, the MASD program at MICA, the Association for Community Design, the Design Justice Network, Creative Reaction Lab, We said Center for Urban Pedagogy earlier, Hester Street. I mean, there's so many amazing folks doing so much amazing stuff. Like, you know, express your gratitude. You know, they're always happy to talk. Yeah. Just find your people and cherish them.
Love it. Well, with that, we should wrap up. I want to give a huge thank you to our panelists here for going live and getting deep into the conversation. So, Allie O'Neill, Pickett Slater Harrington, Julia DiMauro, thank you so much for your time. And we will continue this series of live streams this week. Join us tomorrow for the tree equity conversation from our Prince George's office with our program director, Kelly Fleming, and program manager, Jason.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.